that moment, we lost little Ethan.
On the Dr. Phil show.
I started declining mentally, and I didn't know what was going on. I found one in Lynchburg, Virginia, and Jen discovered some footage as we were going to get to meet and hang out with Dolly Parton.
A bus, a Jeep, and a camper van.
Another question is, what does the future hold?
Hey, I'm so glad that you made it. Come on in. Hey, we're Jen and Kyle.
And we've been living the full-time RV life going on 5 years. And today we're going to answer the question, has it been worth it?
Let's have a seat and we'll share our story with you.
I think before we can let you know if it's been worth it or not, I think we got to go back a little bit.
Kyle and I met in 2006, actually, on Match.com. Honestly, love at first sight. I came home from our first date and told my mom that I was going to marry him one day. And I did. You know, everything was really wonderful. At the time we got married, I had a son, Ethan, and he was 18 months old. He never really met his biological father. For all intents and purposes, Kyle had become his dad. Kyle and I got married in 2008 in Viva Las Vegas, Nevada. We had started planning like this big wedding, right? It just got too convoluted. Kyle suggested, hey, let's move the date up 4 months to our original anniversary. We ended up getting pregnant 2 years after we were married with our son, Ben. Ethan was just such a light and such a joy at this point. He welcomed his little baby brother Ben with open arms. We lived in a tiny little mobile home on the family farm, and those days I could remember thanking God every day for what I had. I was so grateful. And then in 2011, things really changed.
They say your life can change in an instant, and just one tiny moment, and it did. We were living the good life. You know, I had a good job. Jen was staying home with the boys, and we were doing good. Everything was great. Jen and the boys picked me up on September the 16th, 2011, around 4 o'clock from work. I was working the day shift at that point. And we were headed over to Disney for Ethan's birthday, for his 7th birthday, which was 3 days later. So we we hop on I-4, as we've done 1,000 times before. We're about halfway to 2/3 of the way there, and all of a sudden I get a glimpse out of my left eye, a truck losing control, and the next thing I know, I smell fire, I smell gas, I smell antifreeze, and I am bleeding, and the whole world just was like rattling. And in that moment, we lost little Ethan. It was one of those defining moments in your life that that we carry with us, and we will never not carry it with us. I was injured greatly. I had some broken ribs, a small brain bleed, some pretty rough shape. Ben and Jen were perfectly fine, but it killed Ethan instantly. The truck was a construction type truck. He lost control a little bit, and then he blew a tire, and he flew across the median on Interstate 4 and hit us head on, doing 70 miles an hour. And after we kind of got life back together and as best we could, I started declining. I started declining mentally, and I didn't know what was going on. I didn't know for many years. For the next 9 years, I lived in very deep, dark depression. It was something I honestly didn't know what it was. I'd never learned about depression or anxiety. Our marriage kept declining. Our relationships with the kids, we had been, and then Molly followed, and then ultimately Eli followed. Life was hard. We were struggling big time. About midway through the summer of 2019, we decided to throw one last Hail Mary.
You know, every summer we would take a family trip. And the summer of 2019 was no different. Even though our marriage was right at that breaking point, we thought it was important to take a trip with the kids. I owned my own grooming salon. At that point, Kyle stayed at home with them. We weren't doing so hot. We go on this trip. We're going up to Tennessee and coming back down. It was going to be a 4-week trip in our RV. We had a 99 Monaco at that time. We have oh wow. This trip was everything. I mean, we had such a blissful time. We hardly argued. We made so many wonderful memories. And when we got home, we're unloading stuff back into our dream house we just remodeled, right? And Kyle turned to me and he said, hey, what if we bought a bus, remodeled it, sold everything we owned, and traveled the country with the kids. And I looked at him and I said, absolutely not. I have a business here. We have a life here. We're not allowed to do that. We can't do that. It was about 2 weeks of shaving dogs' backsides in my grooming salon. I was daydreaming about being at the Grand Canyon with the kids, making all these beautiful memories, right? And I walked up to Kyle and I said, let's do it. Let's make this happen. And so we did. Every day we started a little something planning to bus life. This was August of 2019. And so we started selling our things, downsizing our things. So the kids were on board with it. Our family was not. So we had to contend with our family not wanting us to do this and with us knowing that we've got to do this one last thing. And if this didn't work, fine. We would figure out how to separate. But we needed to do this to try and keep our family together. We had just finished remodeling our dream home, and now to see all of these material things being sold, it just showed us how much overconsumption that we had. This attachment to things was meaningless. We were really excited to take this next step, but it was no cakewalk.
I'm coming to you guys today for some help. I don't ask this very often. We have some friends that we met several years ago on the road, and we actually just hung out with them at the balloon fiesta.
Bella, I've known her for a couple of years, and we've gotten really close over the years, and she is such a great girl. But something really bad happened to her.
Just days after the balloon fiesta this past year, Bella suffered a stroke, and the family was devastated, obviously. Actually, just this past week, she had to have surgery to have a mass on her brain removed. If you guys can help donate to this wonderful family, I'm gonna drop the link down in the description. Anything that help, during the holidays, they're having a tough time. If you can't help financially, a share, as you guys know, means the world. So, back to the video. A lot of you may not know, but my brother's been full-time for many years. When we started talking about going full-time RV life, he had been trying to convince me to buy a bus because we had always had like traditional manufactured RVs. And I did my research and, well, a little bit of research. And I went on Facebook Marketplace. I found one in Lynchburg, Virginia, 1983 Eagle Model 10. The only thing I knew about Eagles at the time is that they look cool, and a lot of the country music musicians and rock stars rode around in them in the 80s. So I book a plane ticket and make my way up to Southern Virginia. I get there, meet a wonderful gentleman who sold me the bus. He'd been touring in it for, I think, like the last 13 years. I get this bus, I buy it, it's a stick shift. And I'm like, I've driven stick shifts my whole life, no big deal. I get in this thing and I cannot drive this bus to save my life. I called my brother and said, hey, I'm stuck in Virginia, I bought this bus. You're in Tennessee. Is there any way I can convince you to come up here, help me drive this bus back to Florida? Being Steven, being like me, he said, sure. And within a few hours, he was there. He helped me get the bus back down to our home in Brandon, Florida, and he went back up to Tennessee where he was living at the time. This bus needed complete renovation. I was not about to tackle this on my own. So once again, enlisted my brother Steven. Again, he said, sure. So me and Jen flew up to East Tennessee, hopped in his bus, grabbed his crap, and brought him down to our home in Brandon, Florida, where he stayed in our driveway for the next 6 months. And we worked on this bus every single day for about 4 months. And then something really, really crazy happened. COVID-19 was in full swing. The world was coming to an end. We were in the middle of building this bus and trying to sell our dream house. We moved into this bus in February of 2020 and ended up moving it 15 miles to my parents' farm in Dover, Florida. We ended up staying around there for a few months until we kind of got a little bit of a grasp of what COVID-19 was all about. We were tired of sitting there and we decided it's time to hit the road. We had scheduled to stop at a mechanic shop about an hour north of my parents' place, and we took off, and that we were leaving from there. We were getting the oil change, getting the bus greased. We got there and the mechanic walked out of the door of his shop and looked at this bus and just did a straight up facepalm. Our suspension on the rear of the bus was completely worn out. Again, I knew nothing about these buses when I bought it, so we weren't going anywhere. I guess we'll call it our failure to launch. Ended up $6,500 later, and 3 weeks later, the bus was fixed, and we were on our way.
You know, I think that we may have been a bit delusional when we first launched, thinking that our problems would just kind of go away once we moved into the bus. We threw this Hail Mary pass, right? So everything should just be fine. Spoiler alert, it was not fine. And after about 2 months on the road, mine and Kyle's relationship imploded. Kyle, he's had depression at this point for a while, and I got PTSD from our accident. Being ships passing in the night, and then you move into a bus that's 320 square feet, everything explodes. As it would, and it needed to. At that time, we didn't realize how much we needed that explosion because it led me to go to individual therapy. I told Kyle that, hey, you do you. I got to go to individual therapy. I need to be able to manage myself. And within a few weeks, Kyle saw such a big change in me. I felt joyful. I felt light. He asked me this question that I will never forget. Do you think we could both see the therapist together? From that moment on, we've been in couples therapy, and it saved our marriage. It taught us how the other one needs to receive information. We could hear each other and speak each other's language. I think that going to couples therapy was, aside from bus life, the biggest thing ever that could have impacted our family and saved our life.
We're approaching summer of 2021 and we start making our way westward. We got an invitation to go to a tiny home festival to show off the bus, and people could walk through the bus and check it out. We ended up making some really great friends there, our good friends Jed and Sandy, and it kind of introduced us a little bit to the bus world. We'd pretty much, up to that point, spent all of our time in RV parks and around RVers. This kind of introduced us to the other side of bus life, and it was great. We really hit it off with Jed and Sandy, and we were kidding around one day, and we're like, you know what? Why don't we go work the beet harvest this winter together? And then we just kind of laughed, and I'd kind of forgotten about it, to be honest with you. A couple months later, they were like, so we're going to the beet harvest, right? We signed up yesterday. It kind of took me by surprise. Sure, I said I'll do it. We're going to do it. We were over in Idaho, and we were headed to our first full-time families event to meet up with other families that do what we do. We had an amazing time and met people that we still connect with to this day. And we left there and started making our way toward the beet harvest. And we made a stop just outside of Grand Teton National Park. We stayed the night in this gorgeous place and had this beautiful view with the sun setting behind the Tetons. It was incredible. As we're heading toward Fargo, North Dakota, we stayed a night in Bismarck, North Dakota, and Jen discovers some footage. And again, another one of those pivotal moments in your life that's going to change it forever. And you may not even know it in that moment. We found footage of a missing girl's van at the time, and it was a very big case. And we were once again thrown for a whirlwind. From that moment forward, for the next couple of weeks, we did every interview that came to us, all in hopes of helping this family find peace and find their daughter. It was one of those experiences that we'll never forget, and it bonded us with our friends, and they'll always be a huge part of our life. And we thought maybe the chaos and life would slow down a little bit, but not yet.
You know, after that video blew up, our life kind of got a little crazy. And by the spring of 2022, Kyle had this brainchild of an idea that he wanted us to get a camper van, use it as our daily driver, so that way we could take the family to just incredible trips across the country to places the bus wouldn't go. In the spring of 2022, we left Florida, where we were for the winter, and we made our way west, buying our camper van Bodie in Dallas, Texas. We now owned a bus, a Jeep, and a camper van, in which we would have to get this camper van somehow to the Pacific Northwest with this Jeep in tow. And so it was a whole thing. We ended up selling our Jeep in Texas, and then we booked it up to the Pacific Northwest with our buddies Jed and Sandy because they were gonna build this camper van out with us. We really had no idea what this camper van would lead us to.
We made our way up to the Pacific Northwest in late April, and it was still rainy and cold. And we met back up with our good friends, Jed and Sandy, and we were kind of putting this plan together to build this van, and they graciously offered to help us out of the kindness of their hearts because they had just built theirs about a summer before. The challenge was finding a place to do this because we were 2,000 miles away from anything we knew, and we ended up finding a place in northeastern Washington. For the next 5.5 weeks, we busted our butts every single day with our friends and built out this camper van to what it is today. As we're wrapping up the camper van build, child. Our plan was to spend most of the summer, or at least what we had left in it, and travel around with Jed and Sandy. And we come up with this idea, or I probably came up with this idea because that's the kind of stuff I do, that we were going to take the bus down to my buddies in southern Arizona, and he was going to do a little remodel for us, redo the kids' bunk area because they were getting bigger, and we wanted to give them as much space as we could. Me and Eli drove the bus down to southern Arizona, hopped the plane back to Seattle, and then life got hard. I fell into this deep depression that lasted the duration of our summer van trip, which was 12 weeks. Oh my God, it was hard. I could not get it together. Life was so challenging. Even though we got to do and see some amazing things, it was tough. We had split ways with Jed and Sandy. They had some other things they had to do, and we ended up in Sisters, Oregon, and found a really epic boondocking spot, and we ended up going there and staying for a few days. I just remember being so low and just laying in bed, just wishing I was anywhere but where I was, and I felt like it was crumbling around me. I was stuck in this tiny 20-foot camper van with 3 kids, 4 dogs, and my wife, and man, it was tough.
That van trip was such an insane experience. We named our van Bodhi, and it means spiritual awakening and enlightenment. And it for sure brought us to that. And I wouldn't trade those memories for anything because they really helped shape a lot of who we are right now. We were never so glad to get back to our bus in Arizona, and big things always tend to happen to us in September. And we were getting into the new bus. The renovation was beautiful. The kids love their new spaces. So we're feeling pretty good. But we had gotten word over the summer that our property manager, who was one of our friends, had passed away unexpectedly. We had found a new property manager, and at this point, our tenants were refusing to pay rent, and that was our income. We decide that we're gonna keep up our plans of going to the Albuquerque International Balloon Fiesta. Then we would head to Florida to deal with all the mess of the rental properties. I think the Balloon Fiesta was such a turning point in our mental health. Kyle got to ride in a balloon. Yeah, life-changing experience. And so our mental health was doing really, really good. We were back in the bus. We were loving our new renovation. And then we get to Florida. My PTSD just goes haywire. And I do want to note, like, the worst day in the bus is the best day we would have had in a traditional setting, in a traditional house. Honestly, being in a bus has shown me that we can overcome fear. And that's what we've been doing traveling. At this point, my mental health is awful, and we're in Florida, 20 minutes from where our accident occurred, where we lost Ethan. And we're stranded there for 6 months because we were out of income for about 10 months total. We had to drain our savings being able to replenish our property. The tenants had destroyed almost every room. And so that was one of the hardest winters because we were facing being broke for the first time in a really long time.
We set sail on Florida, and earlier that winter we had booked another full-time family event up in Kentucky, and it was exactly what we needed. We had the best time. We knew some people there and made new friends and met the wonderful owners, Tanya and Troy. Had a great time, and then we had planned on spending the majority of our summer up in the Michigan area. We started slowly making our way up there, and it was still tough. I mean, finances were as tight as ever in a bus that drinks fuel at $300 a fill up. Our kids were eating us out of house and home as per usual. It was still difficult. It was very difficult, but we got to go to our buddy Dan's house for a few days and hang out with him, and it was a wonderful time. We met our friends Matt and Clary, traveled with them for a couple months, and had a great time. Finances were tough. I almost took a job up in Michigan because it was getting that bad. Kind of heading toward the end of the summer, and we got this phone call from one of Jen's friends down in Florida about this reality game show that was coming up in Tennessee, and she wanted to know if we'd be interested in interviewing for it. So at that point, we're like, yeah, it pays money, sign us up. We're there. It happened very fast. Within a few days, we did the interview. A few days after that, they accepted us, and they paid us a pretty good sum of money, which saved our rears. And the really cool part about this challenge is we were going to get to meet and hang out with Dolly Parton.
This challenge, the only reason we got to do this challenge was because we lived on the highway, on the road. We said yes to life and yes to adventure. At this point, in being a nomad, we're pretty seasoned. When this challenge came up, we had no money. You know, we're doing what we can to get by over the summer. Our rental properties are slowly bringing in that money again. I had to pawn jewelry on the way down to the family challenge. But what this family challenge did for our family was just, oh my gosh, just insane. insane. Kyle danced on a stage with Ben. We competed in all of these challenges. And as a kid, how cool would that have been to go with your family on a reality show? Like, I think it would be awesome. And so what that did for us is just reinvigorate our souls for life again by saying yes to a game show.
It was an amazing experience.
You know what? I think now would be a good moment for us to go take a walk. The story goes even deeper from there.
It's a beautiful day outside. Let's go.
So we're up to the fall of 2023. We are camping at the Holler Field in Newport, Tennessee. And it was at this point our marriage really was put to the test. We had opened up a lot of our trauma that we've shared together, that we've caused each other. Because of that, we were able to let go and work through so many years of hurt and shame and grief and guilt. I really do believe we were able to level up in our couple as we're growing together on the road. Finally, great news, the property sold and we could be rid of it. But it was about this time we knew that the next step would be finding a new bus. Kyle took off on this next adventure to see if he could find just that.
At this point in our journey, we had to have a new bus. Our kids are growing like weeds. And ever since I was a kid, I've wanted a Prevost, which is, for lack of a better term, the Cadillac of buses. So I found one that we could somewhat afford. Funny enough, just outside of Dallas, Texas. I hopped a plane, flew to Dallas. It was a complete debacle getting to the bus. I get there and I look it over, and in that moment, I realized I don't want a Prevost. Something about the feeling I got when I got there, it just wasn't for me, and I knew it wasn't for me. But I wasn't ready to give up yet. I'd been wanting a bus for probably 2 or 3 years at this point, and I had seen one on Facebook a couple of weeks before then. It was an MCI. It was a really good-looking bus, looked very solid, looked very untouched. I got back to Dallas, hopped a plane, and flew to St. Louis, Missouri. I went and looked at this MCI 102 DL3, and as I was pulling into the parking lot to look at this thing, I knew it was our bus. At that point, I was buying it. I wasn't coming home empty-handed. I worked a deal with the guy. We ended up buying it. I could not be more pleased with our purchase. At this point in the year, it was starting to get cold up in Tennessee, so we decided to start making our way south. And we're headed towards Florida, and something happened, and again, flash of an eye. I was crawling this 4-lane highway, not a car in sight in every direction. We were in like northeastern Georgia, a little town called Royston. All of a sudden, I see this little old lady. I could even see she was a little old lady crossing across the 4-lane highway in her little Toyota RAV4. Never turned her head to even see me come in. Luckily, I saw the whole thing, was able to react enough to clip the back end of her car, and it just spun her around. Luckily, by the grace of God, it did not flip. So I pull over, Jen's behind me, everything's on camera, yank the parking brake on, the boys come running out. What happened? Why are we stopped? They had absolutely no idea we'd even been in an accident. I run down the highway. The lady, thank God, is getting out of the car. She's basically untouched. It was a miracle. Like, this lady was in her 70s, and by the grace of God, she walked away. Her car, not so much. After we get out and cleared up, we are able to make our way down to Florida, and that leads us to one of the darkest times of Jen's adult life.
In December of 2023, when we rolled into Florida, that was the sickest I have ever been in my adult life. For about 3 weeks, I had the flu type B. I couldn't move. I couldn't get out of bed. I was so incapacitated. All I did was pretty much sleep. Once I healed, we were staying about 20 minutes from where our accident was that killed Ethan. And so on top of being super sick, my PTSD immensely triggered. I fell into such a dark place. I couldn't get into the car without having a panic attack. I couldn't go anywhere. I felt so trapped. And so when we were going on a family cruise with Full-Time Families organization in February of 2024, I was pretty excited, and I was even going to bring my service dog Theodore. What happened on this cruise remains with Kyle still to this day.
As we were approaching the end of our winter down in Florida, this cruise was something we were really looking forward to. I've always loved cruising, and I was excited. A lot of our friends were going on this cruise. Our kids' friends were going. We were all super pumped. We get on the cruise, and first day's kind of tiresome. We made the travel down from Orlando area down to Miami. The second day, we get up kind of early, excited to take on the day and do all the things, and we make our way toward breakfast. And the seas were pretty rough for a cruise, especially just outside of Miami. It was fairly rough. And I had something hit me like 10 buses or trucks at the same time. I fell into this I don't even really know the word to describe it. It was a mixture of depression. It was a mixture of anxiety, guilt, shame. Every big, heavy emotion that I had ever felt just kind of crashed down on me in one single moment. And man, to this day, I'm still feeling the effects of that. I have came a long way. It's been a tough spring. It was a tough summer. As we're entering winter now, I'm starting to come along a little bit. Depression has run rampant. It's been a rough ride. That cruise probably was a pivotal moment. I don't know that I can ever step foot on another cruise ship again.
We're leaving Madison, Florida in the spring of 2024 in March because we're going to head west. Kyle had this idea that he wanted property in northern New Mexico. He wanted property. Like all of his ideas, I say yes because, life's an adventure, right? We make our way out here and we roll into this little town called Mora. And this little town called Mora, within 4 days of being here, we end up looking at this property. This property that we're sitting on, we bought it. First day, we stepped on it, didn't really research the weather, didn't research anything. We just stepped on this place and it felt right. It felt like we were meant to be here. And the process was so easy and wonderful and boom, 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 boom. And we signed it, right? We're good. And I think as soon as we signed the dotted line, Kyle had some uncertainty. We just bought this huge piece of property. And so he was regretting getting it. His depression really seeped in even more. And during this time, we buy the property, we move the bus on it, right? In June, we actually appear on the Dr. Phil show in Dallas, Texas. And it was a really wild ride. It was crazy getting to sit next to Dr. Phil and be on stage. It was definitely a once in a lifetime experience, I guess. And then shortly after, we went up to the Tetons to film a documentary, and we camped in the same area that we did when we recorded the footage. And so that was wild for this summer. We went to Schoolie UP up in Michigan. We took a 30-day vacation road trip in our vacation home boatie. And it was just such a summer of memories. And here we are in the fall going into winter. We're at this pivotal point in our bus life. Do we stay? Do we stop? We've been doing this for 5 years. There's things we need to reevaluate. Let's go back down to Blue Betty and we're gonna give you our raw, honest, and vulnerable thoughts about what we think about bus life and if it's cut out for you. So we really wanna know, was it worth it?
That's a tough question to answer. As you've heard, we've lived a pretty exciting, sometimes difficult life. At the end of the day, I think it saved me as a human being. I've had to learn a lot. I've had to learn to live in a small space with someone that is very different than I am. It's been a lot of work. It's been difficult. We've seen so many amazing things. We've met so many amazing people. I would absolutely do it again. It's turned me into who I am today. I think if we would have stuck in the life we were in, I'm pretty confident we wouldn't be together. I don't know what the relationship would be like with the kids. For me, it's been absolutely worth it. Every trial, every breakdown, every time we've been broke, every just challenge has taught us and shaped us and molded us into who we are. But enough about me. Was it worth it to you?
It's been a lot. It has not been easy in the slightest. Choosing this life is choosing hard. And I think it's choosing beautiful hard. I wouldn't be who I am today if I hadn't made the choices to live the life I do now. All the struggle, every breakdown on the side of I-10, fixing an airline, it was worth it to get us where we are today. Our relationship is vastly different than what it used to be on both ends. We have grown individually. We've grown as a couple. We've grown our family. We're trying to break generational trauma, and we never would have done that, I wholeheartedly believe, if we did not move into this bus that we're sitting in today.
If you're considering an alternative lifestyle, I think it's a beautiful thing. I think if you're stuck in life and you're struggling like we were, like the story we told you, mixing it up and trying something extreme, getting yourself out of your bubble, out of your neighborhood you've always lived in, to the same stores, the same restaurants, the same job. I'm not saying you need to go out and buy a 40-year-old bus and pile everyone in it and take off, but really mix it up, be uncomfortable. That's where you're gonna find yourself. That's where you're gonna find the beauty of life. I wholeheartedly believe that.
Get comfortable in the uncomfortable, and then you'll always be comfortable, I feel like. If you want to try this life out, there's some great ways of doing it. Rent an RV, go on a vacation with your family in an RV for at least a week. 2, 3, 4 weeks is even better. Go to an RV lot, go inside RVs, go see what the space is like. Another great option, if you're not an RV person and you want to do more of a bus, go to DIY tiny home shows. They happen in so many different states. They show off their homes like we do, and you get to walk inside and ask them questions, really see how beautifully creative this life can be.
We live in a crazy world and crazy time. Don't be scared to try something new. Try something different. Get out of your comfort zone and go explore the world. You'll be surprised at what you find. Another question is, what does the future hold?
Bus life! We have a new bus coming, Daisy B. She is so close to completion. In the next couple weeks, you're going to want to stick around and see just what a brand new bus that is completely custom built to us, that fits every single one of our needs, looks like.
Yeah, guys, we appreciate you being here and sitting through this with us and talking all this stuff out. Don't worry, we'll be back here again in a couple days with another one of these videos. And until then, take care of yourselves and each other, and we'll talk soon. Jessica Morales was last seen on November the 27th, 2024, missing from the Chicago, Illinois area. 39 years of age, 5 foot 2 inches tall, 140-pound female. Jessica Morales was last seen on the 1400 block of North Humboldt Drive in Chicago, Illinois. If you have information to the whereabouts of Jessica, please reach out to the Chicago Police Area 5 at 312-746-6654, and let's see if you can try to help bring Jessica home.